Yeah, my name is Harvey. I'm the director of Title IX and EEO for Mississippi State University. Well, I think first you have to, have a certain amount of context about exactly how prevalent it is, and there are widely varying statistics. Some of the more famous ones are, 25% in some cases, one in
hmm
four. That really heavily depends on how you're defining sexual assault. There are other studies that look more to like the criminal definition of it that make it more like, one in 100 or something along those lines, or even less. But even if it is less than that, you still at a large university are going to have a significant number of people who have the potential to be victims of sexual assault. So regardless, you have to take it seriously. At MSU, we do a lot of the things that many other universities do in the sense that we have mandatory online modules and training, like what we call SHARP training for faculty and staff, and SAVE training for students. We make those mandatory. We've actually just started a mandatory 4 credit class for incoming freshmen where we do that. That's the mandatory part of it that everybody does. In addition to that, our office works very hard to basically get up and talk live in front of as many different groups as we can, from the residence halls to the student athletes, the Greeks, all those folks, to try to put a face with a name. In addition to that, we have a great group at Health Promotion and Wellness, which is a different
hmm
office here that works really hard. Things like Glow Run, Take Back the Night, Clothesline Project, just many, many different efforts. And I'm sure there are others that I'm not mentioning, but I guess what the takeaway is that it is a multidisciplinary thing that you have to come at it from a lot of angles to try to make sure that everybody hears it more than once and gets the message. So yeah, I think it's useful to kind of differentiate some things. I mean, obviously, there are many different ways in a relationship can be abusive, that may or may not rise to the level of what we would consider Title IX. There are emotionally abusive
hmm
relationships, financially abusive relationships. When we talk about physically abusive ones, the kind where we're dealing potentially with sexual assault, dating, domestic violence, those kinds of things, the definitions can get a little technical. We do sort of try to spell them out in plain English in our policies here at Mississippi State. I think most universities are moving toward trying to make these kind of technical legal definitions as straightforward as they can be. Sexual assault, just to give you an example, a lot of times people, when they think of sexual assault, think of rape. And of course, rape is sexual assault, but it's only one kind. And one
hmm
thing we tell people when we do training programs is that sexual assault can happen in the main room of a party. It can
hmm
be a groping and grabbing a person, for example, under their clothes without their consent. That is absolutely a form of sexual assault. It is not what people traditionally think of as, a completed like penetration or something like that,
hmm
but it is still extremely serious. Dating and domestic violence, another example would be, we obviously, I think, all know that it's a form of dating or domestic violence when somebody physically hits another person, certainly if it's repeated. But, there can be other forms of, at Mississippi State, it does have to be some kind of physical element to it. Feeding back there a little bit.
That's fine.
It does have to be some form of physical threat, but it could, for example, be using physically preventing a person from leaving, right? So it could be standing in the doorway and telling them, you're not going to leave here tonight. You're staying here. I'm not going to let you go anywhere. Threatening to use force against them if they were to go to the police or go to campus authorities. So, they're basically, I guess what I would say is that, anytime you feel like force or coercion is being used against you to keep you in a relationship, you really shouldn't worry too much about the particulars and the details of how it's being done. It almost certainly is a violation of our rules and probably of criminal law, depending on how it's done. And you do need to get help. You need to seek help at that point. The first thing we have to do is make sure that we don't give the impression that we're blaming the victim. I mean, by definition, if a sexual assault occurs, the person who is at fault is the assailant. It's not, no one's ever at fault for being sexually assaulted. That said, right, even though you are not at fault if it happens, it is possible to recognize that the risk exists and to mitigate it. Kind of like if you go to a country where there's a lot of pickpocketing, well, it's not your fault if you get pickpocketed, but there are things you could do, right?
Yeah.
To reduce the risk. So, one thing I think the biggest thing I would say is that The risk of almost anything bad happening in college is higher when you first get here. What we call the first 12 weeks is called the red zone, right? And it's true for everything from grades to disciplinary matters to sexual assault and sexual misconduct. And I think one of the big reasons is because people are thrown into a world where they have, excuse me, thrown into a world where they have a lot more freedom and they don't yet have the skills that they need to navigate it. So, for example, students in their first few weeks are not going to know about grouping up and checking in with friends when they go out, to a party or something like that. They're not maybe not even going to know the importance of having friends with them at all. They just go out completely solo. They frequently have no idea what their alcohol tolerance is. And worst of all, in some cases, they don't have the ability to discern risky behavior from normal behavior. They see college students doing things and they just assume that whatever they see, right, that's just what college students do, right? Whereas if you take a semester, you take a year, you begin to realize, no, that person's just being an idiot, right? They're just they're dangerous. And I think, one of the most important things we can do is when people arrive on campus during that risky time period is to explain the basic, skills that you have of having a group of friends, checking in with them, understanding if you are going to drink, which, we do have rules about that here, but if you are, understand what your tolerance is. Don't be pressured into drinking. If you don't trust a person, don't take a drink from them. Things along those lines. I think can be very helpful. But again, to reiterate, the main message we have to get out to people is even if somebody has no knowledge of those things, it is incumbent on you not to sexually assault them. That is the primary responsibility that we have at MSU at least. So. So, we have a long list of different resources that we make available on our website and it's in the SAVE training. It's in many other places that you can find them, for example, on the decals and the bathroom stalls everywhere here. So there are a lot of different lists of this, but, the first thing I would say is that, our office is obviously the center point if you experience sexual assault for where you can come to. And I'm not going to necessarily repeat the specific information because I know a lot of people from different universities will be there. But you go to Mississippi State's Title IX site and you can call us and we're a one-stop shop. In other words, like a lot of universities, if you come to us, we're going to direct you to a lot of different places and a lot of different folks who can help. We also have a sexual assault advocate. Right now, it's Wybette Roby. She's fantastic. She works currently in student counseling, and she can be a sort of concierge. She goes with people to the police, to the hospital, to us. We'll work with them if they decide to pursue a formal disciplinary charge and be their advocate in that case. In addition to that, we provide contact to off-campus rape crisis centers and other individuals, counseling options that are off-campus. And we have what's called the SAFE line, which is an anonymous line that you can call here at Mississippi State. A lot of universities have these, where if you're not 100% ready to formally report something, you can talk to them. They're licensed counselors and they can lay out your options. And of course, it wouldn't be complete without pointing, every university that has a campus police department has them trained to respond and investigate sexual misconduct. So, they're there as well, and they play a big role here at MSU. So the bottom line is there are a lot of resources. I think that, it's incumbent on every university to have a sort of central clearinghouse, I guess, a central place that you can go to. And here at Mississippi State, that's us. And we have good relationships with different, groups on campus that they know to bring stuff to us. And I think that's just really key that, you can't have you can have 20 different resources, but there needs to be a central point for all of them, right? Well, no one's ever required, obviously, to pursue, whether you pursue, there are many different things you can look at in a campus sexual assault case. You can pursue remedial steps like counseling, moving to a different class, moving to a different residence hall. You can pursue on-campus discipline, through our process. You can pursue criminal charges. You can do 1 and 2, but not 3. You can do 1 and 3, but not 2. You can pick however you want to do it. So, if MSU PD is involved in a case and is called because of a sexual assault, they're going to investigate it. Just like any potential crime, the police are going to investigate it, with the assumption that it could lead to criminal charges. But whether or not you ultimately decide to press charges, whether or not a DA ends up bringing it, before a grand jury, is really irrelevant to their initial job of investigating it. And same with us. we're going to investigate any case that's brought to us as a disciplinary matter very thoroughly. And if you end up deciding, no, I don't want to pursue it as a disciplinary matter, I just want like a no contact order between me and this person, and I'd like to work with student counseling, that's perfectly fine, right? So you definitely have that option. It depends on where you are in terms of like, obviously if there's physical danger that is still present, if the guy is, or not always a guy, but it's often a guy, is hanging around the residence hall, then you need to call the police. If it's something where that immediate danger has passed, but you're ready to report, then at Mississippi State, our office would be the central point for that, right? So you would contact us. If you're not certain you're ready to submit a formal report, then we would suggest that you call the safe line, the anonymous line that we have, and they can lay out what your options are and hopefully get you to a point where you are comfortable talking either to us or to the police. But those would be the sort of the three main places you would look. And it's important that people know those, because you never know, even if you don't think it'll happen to you, you never know when a close friend of yours will have something like that happen, and you'll have to, remember and think, oh gosh, what should I do in this case? And knowing this stuff is helpful, whether you're at MSU or anywhere else. Well, at Mississippi State, as at most schools, the main one would be the Student Counseling Center, and we have some great counselors. Again, as I said, Wybette Roby is currently a counselor at our center. She's also our sexual assault advocate. I think that is the primary one. I mean, obviously every person's situation is unique to them. Sexual assault may be a major part of a person's challenges that they face, but it may not be the whole thing. So I think you have to just do it on a case by case basis. And I think student counseling here at MSU, student counseling service is kind of the center point for that. So. Well, statistically, it is true that women are more likely to be assaulted than men, but certainly a non-trivial number of men can find themselves assaulted. And I'm a member of the Safe Zone Advisory Board here at Mississippi State, and obviously, yes, members of the LGBTQ community do see disproportionately high rates of sexual assault. Many different theories as to why that happens. For example, there's theories that particularly in a place like Starkville, there may be fewer opportunities. There may be fewer folks in that community, meaning you have fewer choices of a romantic partner, which may lead people to stay in relationships where they otherwise might leave that are unhealthy. So that's just one possibility, but there is a lot of research on that. I think it is important for affinity groups in the LGBTQ plus community to be aware of this. We try to include our policies and our practices and our options for help in every training session we do as the Safe Zone. I frequently am the person who actually stands up and does that. So when we train potential allies and when we go and speak to members of the LGBTQ community, we try to make sure this is a big part of it. I think that though you also have to have, I'm a straight male, so it's important to have people who are in that community as well, I think, playing a role in it. So we are really lucky to have, I think, representatives of many of the different groups on campus in the community who are, vocal about it, and I think speak to their groups and raise awareness in those groups. But you can't do it without those folks. They have to be the centerpiece of it. As far as men, a big part of it is getting in front of men's groups. Fraternities is one example, men's sports teams, and many other potential groups, and just taking away the stigma of talking about it. A lot of times, a lot of the reports we get here at Mississippi State from men are, and this is tragic, are abuse from older people, like when they were younger, learning about abuse when they were teenagers or even younger than that. And there is this huge, with women, I think we have done a good job in sort of standardized sexual assault on campus of trying to remove some of the stigma. It's not completely gone, but we're making a good effort on that. But there's a huge stigma for young men and men generally coming forward to report some truly awful things. And I think that it's something that we at MSU can work on, but collectively, we as a society have to get the message out that, if you ever want to heal, you've got to find somebody to talk to about this. And we try to mention that as much as we can. It's a little bit outside of what our office focuses on specifically, because we're really charged with the stuff that's happening here on campus. And so much of the stuff that happens to men, honestly, is stuff that has happened previously in their lives. But we still try to mention it when we can. And I think it's something we've all got to pay more attention to. So. Well, to sort of speak to the premise of the question first, I don't know the specific statistics here, so I can't, endorse exact numbers. But as a general matter, I do believe that we do see a lot of relationship abuse going on, just because in many of the cases where we're, for example, investigating a specific thing like a sexual assault, we will get, in the course of investigating it, anecdotal information about how the parties treated each other or one party treated the other that does strongly suggest an abusive relationship. And I've been just kind of stunned. I've been doing this for 5 years now, since I left private practice at my law firm where I was before. It just, the sheer number and how common it is to see, I guess, what you might consider sort of low level abuse in young relationships. I mean, the occasional striking, hitting, pushing, shoving, to even worse stuff, to kind of holding a person kind of hostage in a relationship with different kinds of threats. And, and in many cases, the people that are doing this, I wouldn't characterize them as just being hardcore evil sociopaths, but they are totally lacking in an understanding of what is acceptable and what's not. They don't have the ability to navigate emotional impulses, and they're doing some really awful stuff that if you were to, sort of see it laid bare on TV, you would rightly think that it is just, absolutely horrible. So I absolutely do believe that you see a lot of that going on. In terms of, resources, again, I would say you shouldn't be afraid to make use of the resources I talked about earlier, our office, the Safe Line, things along those lines, the Student Counseling Center, because you think it's not serious enough, right? So I don't know that I would look to like a different set of resources. What I would say is that the resources we talked about earlier, please don't think, oh, he just slapped me once, or I should say she just slapped me once, right? That's no big deal. Or she just took my stuff, or he just took my stuff and won't give it. I've seen cases of people taking phones away from significant others and like refusing to give them back until they meet some kind of condition, right? Well, it's not direct physical abuse, but it's still a form of abuse, right?
Yeah.
And if that kind of thing is going on, young people need to know that is not normal, right? And you may not have a baseline because you're new at this whole relationship thing. That's not normal. It's not okay. Our resources on campus are for that. That's what they're for. And we do want to talk to you and we do want to help. But I think, with rape, it's obvious that rape is a crime and it's wrong, and everybody knows when it happens that something terrible has happened. Most cases, but with the sort of low level relationship abuse, many times people don't realize, no, this is not okay, right? And that is a message we need to get out. Yeah, I mean, I think that the big thing to remember is, if you watch on a larger level, societally, sexual assault and dating and domestic violence have kind of become politicized in our larger national discourse. If you look, for example, back under the Obama administration, we had very aggressive sets of national standards that colleges were supposed to follow, and now the Trump administration is kind of pushing back and swinging the other direction. Um, I really hope that in the next few years we can figure out a way to sort of depoliticize this and to realize that we all are really, hopefully, I think, wanting the same thing, which is that we want to see a dramatic reduction in sexual assault and dating and domestic violence. We do understand that in a university setting, as with any public institution, it has to be done in a fair way, right? We can't do what some universities have done, which is just sort of presume that people are guilty and not have a fair process. That's just as unacceptable. And when we do that, we actually make it more difficult. We create enemies that we shouldn't have to have, people opposing our processes. So I really do hope in the next few years we can start to kind of put some of that political football fighting behind us and realize that these are goals that parents, students, college professors, administrators, all of us should want to get. We need to do it in a way that's fair and even-handed and not politically biased either way. And I really do hope that we kind of mature as a country. Hopefully when we come back and get on campus after the COVID-19 situation, that we can begin to to be a little bit more mature about how we handle it. That's my hope anyway.